Well, good afternoon here on the East Coast. My name is Christine Nicholas, CEO, founder, chief cook, and bottle washer at People Science. Good afternoon, or hope you're having good lunch to our West Coast friends, and good morning, and thank you for always being the morning people, our West Coast community. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I hope everybody's well. This is, and pictured here too is Lindsay Roundtree. Give us a hi, Lynn.
Hi.
And Lindsay's our director of recruiting, and Jess Oberto, give us a hi, Jess, who's our director of process engineering. We're always happy to be here with you. So we are now in week 10 of Shelter at Home. We started these webinars 2 weeks before. Our first webinar, in case you weren't part of our community at that point, was with Parag Vaish of Google, talking about being a diverse manager and creating a diverse team. By the way, all of our webinars are available at our YouTube if you'd like to join us there. I've got to tell you, I'm so excited to be talking to you and showing you some of the findings that we have about leadership in TA. It happens to be something I'm very personally committed to, because I've been in talent acquisition myself for a long time, and it took me quite some time to learn the value of leadership and really coming out of the weeds and into leadership for myself as far as TA was concerned quite a few moons ago now. But we're glad that you're here with us. If you aren't part of our community, you'll probably receive a LinkedIn, you will receive a LinkedIn invitation to join our groups. We have 2 separate groups, or you can be part of both. One is specifically just for TA, the other is for HR leadership and CHROs. And it's a good pool of people that we have in there now. We've created those groups at your request. And actually, we're doing this webinar at the request of 2 of our members. So let's talk about it. Perfect timing, right, guys? It's, working on talent acquisition as compared to in talent acquisition. Now, I know that a lot of us are still in this amped up mode, but there are many people that are having a lower rec load. So whatever your position, we hope that you gain a lot out of today. The chat cycle is on. We'll keep taking a look at that. And if you have questions, of course, just pose them to us. So I'd like to start this off with the way we view recruiting. So just imagine this is your first morning at your desk as a recruiter, and your sound might get a little wonky, but let's take a listen. Well, nobody wants to be that guy, right? When we originally started to talk about this presentation a year or so ago, we were trying to find somebody drinking from a fire hose, and this was the only picture that came up. And I'll tell you why this analogy, because so often when and by the way, nobody ever calls us and says things are going really great with our recruiting, so come in and give us a hand. It's always, I'm drinking from a fire hose. I'm changing the wheels on the bus as it's moving. And then the last that I heard, actually an event of over 1,100 TA professionals, the guy on stage said, I feel like I'm changing the wings on the plane as it's flying, which really scared the heck out of me. I mean, we're starting to sound downright scary, right? Because under normal circumstances, we are just inundated all the time. And drinking from the fire hose is the key thing that we've heard. What's interesting too is we had some interns that were trying to find, that we said, can you find a picture of somebody changing the wheels on the bus? And they were like, you can't do that. You can't change the wheels on the bus while it's moving. You can't. So why is it that we're starting to sound so scary about our own profession, right? And why do we take kind of pride in it? Oh yeah, me, I'm really busy. Yeah, I'm drinking from fire. Yeah, I'm changing the wheels on the bus. So we hear this a lot. And I think it's indicative of the fact in TA, we so often have become reactive. So today, when we talk about leadership in talent acquisition, I'd like you to think of it in terms of three different segments, right? So personal leadership. If you're a recruiter and you're in your job and you're doing your job, there's personal leadership, right? So from a personal standpoint, I'm doing my job and I'm in my job, and now how do I work on my job, right? And then the second phase of leadership is as a manager or team leader, in our cases, we typically call them supervisor, any type of leader of TA. Then you're saying to yourself, well, how do I go from, and maybe you're working in a desk, right? Many of you working in a desk, and maybe you have one support person, or maybe you have 20, but you're still in the weeds. So you've got to be able to pull yourself out of the weeds and look at the leadership side of it. And then the third that I'm so glad that you're here for today, because we need to start doing more leadership in our talent acquisition profession in general. And the reason for that, I think that we all agree that talent is critical, right? It's critical, and the talent gap just keeps getting bigger. So even though we're living through large unemployment numbers and COVID, we still have huge disparities in the type of talent that's available and the type of positions. And, as we were finding out, right, as we're starting to, most of us are pulling through the COVID days, we're starting to see a more robust, even though the latest unemployment numbers are going to hit, if you look 2 months out, or where we are now, because those numbers trail by a month, we're starting to see a big pickup even in the job boards and requisitions. So it's coming back. My sense is it's going to come back with a vengeance, probably over the next 3 or 4 months. And then I think going into 2021, especially towards the end of the first quarter, we're really going to start to feel the magnitude of where we were as far as needs are concerned. So and even if we didn't, by the way, if we go all the way back to the Great Recession of 08, 09, 010, still large disparities in the type of talent that's available. And it really cripples the organizations, right? Imagine the difference that one particular stellar salesperson can bring to the organization. Or if you're working in development and IT, I mean, we've seen situations where one person has changed an entire product line. But just last year we witnessed that. And then we also know, what can go wrong with a bad hire. So here we are in these really, really critical positions. And so often TA just isn't, it's just not even acknowledged. A few years ago, a CHRO of a Fortune 50 gave me a buzz, and she said, our CEO, along with 7 other CEOs in the industry, was asked to go to the White House to talk about jobs and how do you create more jobs. So he came to her and he said, what am I going to say? And she said the devastating thing was nobody said, where's the CHROs? Where's the talent acquisition leaders? They were looking at CEOs. And the outcome of that meeting was pretty bleak when she went through a debrief with him, because the CEOs don't know how to speak to this. And why should they? It's our profession. And what I drew from that conversation more than anything else is, and today, we're not quoted. CHROs aren't quoted, HR isn't quoted. You don't see a lot of TA people being quoted about the job gap. You'll hear them talk to us about candidates. What should a candidate do? And you'll see us get some pretty good press on that here and there. But even with that, our profession is low end on the scale, when really we are the ones that are on the front line of this talent gap. So I'd like to also talk about, and just remind you, because a lot of us who got in this industry, I remember, and a lot of times I'll sit in on interviews with people that are new to recruiting, and go, well, why do you want to be in this business? And they'll still say, because I like people. Remember when you loved all people, and that's the way it was, right? But the truth is, what we do is critical to people, really critical to their, and especially these days, some of us that, that are displaced and are feeling it, kind of can have more empathy now. But our jobs are critical to individuals. So we know that we know that jobs are critical to people. But have you seen the statistics? Because they're pretty significant. And the Gallup organization has done a good job in a book called The Coming Jobs War, which was written a little while ago, but some really good points still in there, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Jim Clifton wrote it. So if you're looking for it, it's The Coming Jobs War, Jim Clifton, not to be confused with the talent war. It's a little bit different. But the Gallup organization has done a great job of drawing a correlation between people's work and their happiness factor. Okay? So if I love what I do and I'm happy with what I do, overall, my depression rates are lower. My family life is better. My children are happier and I lead a more productive life. So the key to success is what we do, and our jobs are crucial. So anytime somebody questions, hey, what do you do? Can you just, find a job for this person? Maybe they're missing that big picture that we need to start to articulate to everyone. So critical to people, critical to our organizations. This one kind of gets me in the gut a lot because especially our RPO division, a lot of times we'll come in and the organizations that we're trying to support are failing because nobody understands the value really of what they do. The reoccurring theme, in fact, where you might say we're drinking from a fire hose, the reoccurring theme that we hear is, well, can't you just work harder and faster? Now, if you were going to start a new division, let's say creating widgets, would finance say, can't you just do that faster? Can't you just get those widgets made tomorrow? No, you would have a plan. People would acknowledge that you would have a plan, and you wouldn't be looked at as somebody who should just materialize people. And this is permeated so much that if we go back to Fortune 100 group, I was working with someone, I thought she did a fantastic job as the incoming CHRO, putting together a talent acquisition strategy that was really good. It was well written, it was articulated well, you really felt the culture of the company, even though she'd been there a short period of time. And she had a great relationship, not only with the entire C-suite, but with the board. Well, somebody got the name Christine confused on the email, so I somehow got looped into this conversation that was going on. And as this proposal was circulated, it was amazing to me that 3 of the leaders came back and said, this is good, we don't have budget, work harder, work faster, you'll get there. We've got an identity issue. So the more we think of ourselves in terms of leadership, the more we'll elevate our own profession. And we're going to talk about ways to do that today as we move ahead. Here is, this is just a good pictorial too. And if you do get a chance to read the Jim Clifton book, one of the things that he talks about is taking jobs locally to actually, I live in a small town in New Jersey and we don't have a mayor, or the mayor is kind of like, we have an executive board and they circulate mayor, like 1 year she's the mayor and next he is. But if we went to our local municipalities and they created in the top 3 of their objectives was jobs, just think of the difference that would make, right? So for example, in my area, there was a Walmart that wanted to come in and it was voted down immediately. They didn't want a Walmart here. But had jobs been part of the top 3, well, maybe they wouldn't have gone with Walmart, but maybe they would have talked to Target when Target came to them, right? So really understanding this and being able to articulate this is what our profession does. And then of course, we play a lot in the international field as well. Whatever happens here affects the entire world, right here in the US, and most of us work globally these days anyway. So how we wind up here? How do we wind up in this atmosphere of just work harder and faster? And yeah, people, maybe part of it is because people are subjective, right? But we do know the benefits of applying good process and how that can change everything. So how did we get here? Well, we inherited it, right? We were born into it. And it just grew and it just grew into the term I will use freely today, reactivity, right? So we got it from our moms, who got it from their moms, who got it from their dads before that. Just go find people. And as things started to progress, we added more technology into the mix, but you don't necessarily see a lot of really best practices applied to TA. Now we see them in HR, but not as much to TA. So a few years ago, when we were approached by a client who said, how are you doing it? We created the Recruiting Continuum that Jess and Lindsay are going to go through for you, that we think is going to be a great tool that you're going to be able to use. Before we do that though, I want to address the elephant in the room, which is time, right? How much time can you take from your day to think in terms of leadership as compared to putting out fires, right? And that historically, that's been our issue. We're trying to fill job orders. We're only one person. We've got 40 job orders, and most of them have to be filled right away. where we're a team of 50 doing that. And it's kind of multiplied from there. So in order to move into a leadership, even if it's just at your personal desk, you've got to be able to steal time. This is one of my favorite charts and certainly a game changer for me professionally and personally. If you haven't seen it, this is part of the Stephen Covey books, part of his methodology for sure. I was reminded, by the way, that this actually was created by Eisenhower. President Eisenhower years ago used quadrant planning. So quadrant 1 is urgent and important matters. So if you take your work, and let me clarify, important in the terms of the quadrants has to do with your mission, your job, your responsibility. What are the things that you're supposed to do, right? So urgent and important are things that you need to work on. Whereas non-urgent and not important things are really important things. They tie to your mission, like say, let's having lunch with a hiring manager, but it's not urgent. If you don't schedule it, somebody's going to call you and say, why don't you do that? If you don't fill a job, somebody's going to call you and say, why don't you do that? So, and then there's not urgent, right? And not important, but things you have to do. So let's say a coworker's out, you've got to cover for their desk, doesn't meet your margin, but you've got to do it and it's urgent. And then not urgent, not important, which is Monday morning quarterbacking, but instead of it being like a 20-minute conversation, it's an hour and a half long conversation. So I'm sure most of us are not doing that, right? At any point in time. But these are the quadrants explained. So let's just take a look at urgent and important, quadrant 1. So quadrant 1 are things like learning what's needed for a requisition, searching, screening, interviewing, scheduling, incoming. The important thing to know about urgent and important in quadrant 1 is that it works on you. When you're done at the end of the day or the night and you're exhausted, that's because your job has been working on you. It's been dictating to you what you are going to do. By the way, we didn't come into this world wanting to be forced to do things or to meet certain needs, right? We actually came in on the other side, quadrant 2, which is not urgent but important. Really important things that you need to do that you're probably not going to get fired if you don't jump on and do it. But here's the thing, these two are really connected. The more you do of quadrant 2, the not urgent but important, the smaller urgent and important get. So some of those pieces are building relationships with hiring managers, creating comprehensive recruitment plans, reviewing all your metrics, reviewing supplier metrics. We have a saying at People Science that emotions lie, numbers don't. If we have a recruiter who says nobody wants this job, we all say, well, how many calls did you make? How many people did you engage with? Let's look at the numbers. Is that true that nobody wants this job? Or did we just reach out to 20 people today and no one got back to us? But when we look over the month, you need to talk to 40 to engage one. Those are real numbers, by the way. Look at Lindsay. Those are real numbers, by the way. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. But if you know that, then you can prepare for that. And if you know the realistic number beyond how inundated you felt, and if you can come at this when you're feeling clear-headed, it changes everything. Reviewing supplier metrics, planning meetings, well-planned meetings, seminars and training. Kudos because you're here, right? Creative thinking time. Years ago, I had a manager who said to me, I don't care if you're throwing a ball against the wall or taking a walk around the parking lot. I want you to come up with a better solution. And I thought, I've got free time. I'm going to figure out, I'm going to walk around the parking lot and nobody's going to get upset. I mean, that's not the way we're used to functioning, right? We're used to always being under the gun. But the truth is those breathers make a big difference. The candidate experience, team building, all urgent, all important, but not urgent pieces fall under quadrant 2. And here's the thing, you work on quadrant 2. This is our natural state to be able to proactively do things to make our jobs and our lives better. So all this good work comes from here. You need to look over here to do it. So how do you do that? You start to think in terms of urgent and important, of quadrant 2, not urgent, but important, as urgent and important, because the more time you put over here, the more this is going to shrink. Trying to move my banners around. Hang on a second. Okay. And this is a good pictorial of that, I think. You want your biggest bucket to be not urgent and not important. Now, that doesn't mean that your time isn't going to wind up under urgent and important, but it means that the more you put here, the more you're going to shrink the amount of time. So let's use something simple to understand, candidate pipelining. If you're candidate pipelining and you're building relationships and you're answering their calls and they know who you are, when a requisition that's really hot comes in, you now have a pipeline of people, which shortens your time to fill and eases the burden, right? So that one's easier. But taking that train of thought and moving it over and knowing that it's okay to do this. One of the things that I know I struggle with in the organization is getting recruiters who are working under deadlines to understand the importance of being able to do those quadrant 2, not urgent, important things. It's okay. It's okay. It's not going to make you miss a mark. It's going to make you get better at making the mark. And now, what a better time than now? Some of us have a little bit more time than we did before if our requisitions are low, so that's a good time to do it. But if you're still under the gun, take 5 minutes, just 5 minutes a day to go into not urgent but important. Address one issue from a bigger picture and see the difference that makes, because 5 minutes a day, right? 25 minutes a week, that's a good start. And if that's all you can commit to, then that's where you go. So with that, we're going to take a close look at the recruiting continuum. Now, because when we started the company, there really was no good business process laid out. You couldn't find it anywhere. We had our first couple customers said, well, how are you able to diagnose what I need to do? And we're like, yeah, how are we able to do that? Let's do a schematic. So that's when we created this. So what we did is we took all the elements, all the things that happen in recruiting and laid them flat. So define and attract is at the beginning of our wheel. How are you defining and attracting? We're going to take a deep dive in a second. But let's just say, for the sake of explanation right now, defining and attract is I have a job. Recruiting. Jess, you look like a good candidate for me. Jess, would you be interested in a job like this?
Absolutely.
Yeah, just say yes, Jess. There we go. Great. Okay, I'm going to offer you the job for $10 an hour, Jess. Will you take it?
Yes. Taken.
Okay. Do you have people that like you and can tell me good things about you?
Of course.
Yeah, that's what most references are, right? Tell me about who likes you the most. Okay, great. So you're going to work from home. We're going to send you a computer, or you're in office. There's the men's room. There's the ladies' room. There's your desk. Then I check back. How's Jess doing? Communications. Oh, everybody's happy. Everything's fine. Now, I just recruited Jess, and I just went through the entire continuum. Now, obviously, there's a lot more to it than this, but really, you could go through it that quickly, right? And the whole time I'm processing that candidate, Jess is looking at me. She's hearing what I have to say. She's really determining what her thoughts are, consciously and unconsciously, about the organization I represent by me, right? And then down here, data at collection and reporting, which kind of cracks me up. But really, we all talk about reporting, and we need tools to do that. But you're recording most of this in your brain. That's what's happening. So if you're not jotting it down, you're not putting it into some type of a system or a spreadsheet or a notebook or whatever it is you're using, you're capturing this in your brain. So these are all pieces of, this is what happens during recruiting. Now, what we discovered is, if we take each one of these segments and we use these as the measuring stick, and by the way, you can go to our website and do this anonymously. We break the continuum down with some highlights. Now, these are just highlights. There's a lot more to define and attract than you're seeing right here. But this is what the actual self-assessment looks like at our website. So this is going to allow you to go in and do a personal assessment. Before you jump the gun and go to the website and do that, Lindsay and Jess are going to take us through each one of the buckets. They're going to tell us what fits into what buckets and what the highlights, just the highlights are, because depending on your organization, they could be quite different. If you don't have a pen and paper, or you can't use your computer while you're watching the video, I'll give you a minute or two to do that while these guys get ready. And then what you're going to see is, this is what comes under define and attract. And then over here, here are some of the solves that we've seen. So great. I hope you get a lot out of this. Jess and Lynn, turning it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Christine. So I am going to start with the first bucket in the continuum, define and attract. So here is where you get a solid understanding of the position, what are the requirements, really understanding what the employee value proposition looks like for your company, even the department focus, maybe even that specific location or market. Having employment branding in place, candidate marketing, so making sure you are getting the word out about your company, advertising, that's included as well. Your website, so how are your candidates viewing your company? What's their impression of their company when you go to their website and even when they're applying through the ATS? And then making sure that as you're recruiting, you have a good strategy in place to be capturing active candidates as well that are interested, but also those passive candidates that might be a great fit for your company, but they just don't know it yet. So how do you get there? So we're going to talk about some of the best practices and things you can do to make sure that your area of define and attract is always moving up towards 100%. So one of the things that's big with define and attract is that point of understanding, and that requires communication. So being able to talk to your hiring managers, build a relationship with them, frequent communication, and really showing that you understand their business, you understand what they value when they're looking for candidates. So in the beginning of a recruitment, having that launch call, having really good questions to ask them, and just ensuring that you know what you're looking for so you're always on target through the recruitment. Part of, when you're attracting candidates, of course, you're going to have job postings and job descriptions posted. One of the things you can do proactively is look at those job descriptions. Sometimes we just, when you're drinking from the fire hose in recruiting, you take the job description, slam it onto a page and post it and you're done. But really looking at your job descriptions, looking at the verbiage. Are they attracting diverse candidates? Are they telling the story of your company? Are they effectively showing what the EVP looks like? And also a good way to measure this, there's tools out there you can actually use. I've used Textio in the past. You can put the verbiage into this software and it'll give you a score on actually how good your job posting is and what the likelihood of attracting specific groups of candidates would be. And then they'll give you suggestions for different words you should use. Really great tool. Using that, you can roll it into your employment branding campaign. So being able to tailor and specialize recruitment campaigns based on location, position, because your person in finance is not going to be attracted to the same ad as your person in IT. So being able to tailor those specifically and hit your targets, as well as you're doing this work, being able to document what you're doing in advertising. So Lindsay and I always like to keep a project planner for each recruitment or recruitment initiative we're working on and note and document what we're recruiting, what resources we're using, how many candidates we're getting, how many of those were hires, and storehousing that data. So then when you have to fill that position again, you have the information right there. You're not recreating the wheel. So this would be a good time to go back and look when you had those successful recruitment initiatives, what worked for you, and document that. So the next person moving forward or you can easily take that and go. Of course, looking at your EVP, taking a really deep dive into this would be a great time. I've worked with some clients before and we put together focus groups. So we took focus groups from different areas of the business and we just listened to them. So what were your expectations of the company as a candidate? And then how did that compare to your expectations of the company now that you're an employee? And we got a lot of interesting feedback and we were able to take that and re-engineer the EVP that they were currently using. So definitely using the EVP and just making sure that the EVP is reflected throughout the entire recruitment cycle. So taking it in your advertising, job postings, as well as the recruiters. So does their verbiage on the phone with the candidates reflect the EVP accurately? You want to make sure that everything's consistent and that the candidates are receiving a true impression of what your company wants to reflect.
Good.
So now that Jess has gone through the whole portion of really defining and attracting, I wanted to take some time to talk to you about recruiting. And I have a feeling that every recruiter just rolled their eyes because they're like, oh, we do this every day. But There are some things that we can do to really tailor our recruiting process specifically to our positions that I think we should review together. So documentation of a really good recruiting plan. Tracking your recruiter results. How are you doing that? Where are you doing that? The right balance of sourcing, screening, processing, and closing. I know this seems really simple, but do you have the right skill sets? Do you have the right talent on your team? Is sourcing falling back on your recruiters? What's really happening there? The reliance on your outsourced vendors. Who are you using? How are you using them? Can you show a cost savings? Training, very obvious. And then how are you measuring up to your competitors in this space? So to take a deeper dive into the documentation of your recruiting plans, really just knowing when you kick off a new position, are you tailoring your recruiting specifically to that position, to your company, that division, and that position? Are you getting very minute to make sure that the recruiting process is very seamless and moves along appropriately? When tracking your recruiter results, how are you doing that? We're all using applicant tracking systems, which is great, but are you tracking what's happening before your applicant tracking system takes place? Is your data going into spreadsheets, notebooks, LinkedIn, what have you? Do you have that centralized somewhere? If not, you're losing a lot of the really great reporting that you could be getting. So making sure you're centralizing how you're tracking all of your results. The right balance of your sourcing and your screening. So a lot of the recruiters that I've talked to, not so much lately, but before, will say, you know, we're recruiting hard, we're recruiting fast, we just don't always have time to source. So have you talked to your recruiters and said, how much of what you're doing is recruiting? Do you have time to source? What's your comfort level with sourcing? Really understanding, engaging what their level as a sourcer is. Some people are really great at sourcing and some are not. So ensuring that you have the right balance. Are your recruiters high volume recruiters? Are they more niched recruiters? And if so, do you have them assigned to the right places? I've got recruiters that are high volume. I lived in that space. I love that space. But then I have those who could fill a legal position in half the time I could, because they're used to that specific niche. So you've got a great team. Are you balancing it correctly? And then really defining how to do that, really crucial. Your reliance on your outsourced vendors. So how is that being done? Are you using agencies? Are you using RPOs? What are the different tools that you're using? Are you using Stella, Woo, those really great candidate aggregators that can come to you? And if you are, what's your return? Is this something the addition of a recruiter would save you some money on? Really taking a deep dive in what that looks like and seeing if you can show a cost savings. We always want to do that every year, kind of show the savings that we were able to produce. So is that something that you're getting from those vendors? Continuous training. This is a big one, right? So we get our candidates, we get them in, we get them trained. Where does that training end? Are we consistently training our candidates appropriately and getting them through? Are we leaning on training? Are we leaning on IT to ensure that those pieces are filtering back through? And then how are you measuring in comparison to your competitors? Is your EVP more appealing? Listening to your candidates and really understanding what their perception is. It's different spaces, IT in particular, I think they're a good example right now because it's still a very competitive market for IT. So, you know, what is going to turn this candidate and have them say, you're the better choice? We know our candidates have options right now. What are you doing to make sure you're their option? EVP is a big one. Making sure your messaging is consistent. Having a great closer. That's big. If you can have someone on your team that can swoop in and close, that can make a world of difference, especially if they have a lot of industry knowledge. So not just knowledge on your company, but knowledge on how to close this person. Sometimes a closer can really save the deal. So really, how are you stacking up and what are you doing to ensure you're staying in front of your competition?
You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think this one's mine. Candidate processing. So each step of the recruitment process, every day you're touching on candidate processing. So I think it's really important to make sure that you have this piece buttoned up while you have the time to do that. So one part of candidate processing is making sure that someone's measuring it and tracking it, right? So is it monitored, surveyed, and documented? And most importantly, that'll give you a lot of good data, and you'll be able to then go back and look and be able to evaluate things like your candidate experience. How does your ATS affect the candidate? How long does it take someone to complete an application? Do people start applications and not complete them? Is the application too bulky? That type of data. With the data, then you want to make sure that it's correct. So taking the time to go back and looking at reporting through each step of the recruitment cycle, and make sure, one, do you have the reporting that you need? Not only the reporting that you need, but the reporting that your hiring managers and stakeholders might find valuable as well. So this would be a good time to sit down with them and see what their concerns are about the recruitment cycle. Are they worried that the candidates are taking too long to get through the interview process? So that type of feedback, and then looking at your metrics will help determine what type of reporting you need, and then being able to go back and say, is this reporting accurate? So again, getting the feedback and then comparing the data will help you get there. Your referral programs and processing. So a lot of the times we'll start working with clients and they say, yes, we have a great referral program set in place, but they really don't have the time to dig deep into the referral program and see how it's working and measure it as well. So taking a deep dive into your referral program, looking at the numbers, where are your referrals coming from? Are there certain areas of your company where you get more referrals? And then also, are these referrals truly vetted through your company? So digging deep, gathering a lot of data behind the referral program, and then you can go back and tweak it as needed. So we've done that for other clients, and we've implemented a separate interview questionnaire for the referrals. So asking them more questions about how do you know the referral, what was your working relationship, those types of things. And also speaking to the employees that referred the employees. So being able to take a deep dive will put a lot more value on your referral programs and also a lot more trust in it. Internal movement processing. So looking at the way that things are moving internally through recruitment from department to department, and getting feedback on that and re-engineering the process as needed. And your interview ratings online. Everyone's concerned about this, right? There's nothing worse than waking up and seeing a bad Glassdoor review. People only go to Glassdoor typically when they're upset or annoyed anyways, not when they have a great experience. But really having the know-how and keeping up to that in real time to stay on track of your ratings online and being prepared to respond to those or handle any issues that come up. So what are some best practices that you can do to get to 100% in this area? Always looking at your process and readjusting as needed. Like I mentioned before, you can do this through data and feedback. So feedback from your candidates, feedback from your hiring managers, feedback from anyone that's a part of this recruitment process. Sometimes you might get something really valuable from an admin assistant that's helping you schedule interviews. You might have a better idea of a way to streamline things. So taking all that feedback and looking at it holistically to streamline the process. And you'll notice that that'll happen for you for each part of the recruiting segment. So not only interviewing, but onboarding, that's a big one. And just readjusting, re-engineering, and then making sure that people are aware of those changes in the process. Maintaining your processing in real time is always important. And a lot of that I found with my teams comes down to training. So making sure that you have a training manual in place for your team. Everyone's aware of the process. You might have a new HR technology you'd like to implement into your candidate scheduling piece. So making sure that everyone's educated, everyone's trained, they know what the expectations are, and that's always, of course, to keep things moving in real time. Looking at your ATS responses and its role in processing. So what is your ATS's effect on the recruitment cycle? So the time to fill, the candidate experience, and then being able to readjust as needed or switch to a different ATS. We always suggest surveys and online reviews. So getting a real-time feedback from a candidate can make a huge difference. So you may have a candidate that went through the entire interview process. They did a big travel across the country to meet with the hiring manager. When they get home, we would like to reach out to them within a day or two and say, hey, how did your interview go? What's your feedback? What worked really well for you during this process? What can we improve upon next time? And we've done that in different ways. We've had recruiters that are really good at that personal relationship with the candidate. They might just want to pick up the phone and talk to them. Or we might do a survey online that they can just complete at home on their own time and be able to give anonymous feedback. Whatever you feel comfortable and your recruiting team feels comfortable with, it's good to have that prepared ahead of time, because they can give you a lot of insight that you might not be thinking about as you're moving through the process.
Interviewing. So the effectiveness of your candidate pre-screen. So how is that going for you? Are you using tools? Are you just having that quick conversation? How in depth does that candidate pre-screen go for you? The interview criteria and how relevant it is to your company, the division, the position in particular. Are you really tailoring and catering that just to that one position? We know that that's time consuming, but there's a lot of value in it. Training on interview bias and diversity. This is a big one, right? This is something everyone is talking about. We're all listening to, are you doing this? How are you doing this? The organization knowledge of interviews and the methodology. So what is your method? Do you have a structure to your interviewing? Are you using interview guides? Is there a standard process for your interviewing? And then time to interview and the cost that it takes for the amount of time that it is to get through your interview process. This touches a little bit on some of the data collection that we have referenced, but it certainly is some very crucial information. So in the interview process, a lot of the times the first question you'll get from your hiring manager when you have that initial calls, how long is it going to take you to fill this position? And if you fill this position prior to this and you've tracked the data appropriately, you'll be able to answer that question really seamlessly. Because the amount of time it took to fill a tech role and your company, the number for your company of what your average time to fill in can look very different. So really being able to know those numbers and produce that quickly is going to be very important. So how are we doing some of these things? What are some of these outcomes? So the effectiveness of the candidate pre-screen. This needs to be customized directly to the company that you're working for, the division, and then even some tweaks specifically to the position. Making sure that you have an interview guide that touches all of those hot spots and really covers all of the different pieces that you want to interview towards, to make sure that when you get through the interview, you have a very strong confident level that this person is or is not the right person for the position. And then the relevance for your position, the interview criteria relevance, are you really doing that deep dive and making sure it's specific to the position? So again, are you making sure that those interview guides are matching up for every single position you have? Again, time consuming, but huge value. The interview bias piece, are you looking for assessments, tools, and trainings to bring in-house? Are there any standards that you've set for your interview process? Are you looking for a diverse slate of candidates? Are you mandating a diverse slate of candidates? What are you doing there? We're seeing some really exciting and big changes happen. People are putting their foot down and saying, we want this diverse slate of candidates. If that's something that you're doing, great. If it's not something you're doing, it's something you really need to start thinking about doing. People want to see this change. They want to see you make these changes. And so far, we're seeing people take big leaps in that direction. And then, so I really wanted to talk about your time to interview, your cost of your interviews, right? So we have these initial conversations with our hiring managers, and a lot of the time they'll say, look, I just don't have a lot of time for this, which is understandable. We realize that this job is secondary to their everyday life, right? And odds are if they have a vacancy, they're working twice as hard. So really being able to stress and say, if you give me 3 hours of your week each week, I can get this position filled for you in 30 days. That holds a lot of value, really a lot of value for so many reasons. As a recruiter, you can plan on how long it's going to take you to move on to your next position. As a hiring manager, you get this great level of confidence that you know your role is going to be filled soon and there's a light at the end of the tunnel because you are working twice as hard because of your vacancy. But for workforce planning, as a supervisor, a manager, a TA leader, this is really crucial. How can I possibly go to my CHRO and let them know I'm going to have this position that's high priority filled in 30 days when I have no numbers to back me up? We talk a lot about at People Science how, you know, our numbers don't lie and emotions do, and this goes back to that. So really kind of holding us all accountable, making sure that we have and are tracking this data appropriately is really going to give you some very clear-cut answers and confidence, right? I can confidently get on the phone with the hiring manager and say, in 31 days, I'll have this filled. And when our team fills it in 21, it's a huge victory. And next time, we can really look at how we did that so we can do it again. This is really very important to the interview process. So that was it.
Am I on the right page, or are we still, did I miss something, Lynn?
Nope, I believe reporting was next.
There we go.
So reporting, I know you all expect Jessica to have this conversation with you instead of me because she does processing and implementation, right? So you're like, why would, you know, the director of recruiting need to have this conversation with me? Believe it or not, these reports are extremely important to Jessica. She lives and breathes them, but so do I, and so do the rest of so does the rest of our team. Here are some really crucial things you should be able to get. If you don't have this data, you really need to look at how you can start getting it. What is your cost of vacancy? How much is it costing you to have that role open? Each step of the recruiting cycle. So how long is each step of your recruiting cycle taking you? The cost of your hire, how much is it costing you to make this hire? Whether you're using an agency, whether you're using your own internal recruiters, whatever the case may be. What is that cost to you? Does it make sense now that we're all working remotely to have your recruiting team in a different place in the country because it's going to save you some money? Does it make sense to drop your agencies because they just are costing you so much and it's a better opportunity to go into a partnership with someone else? Really looking at that is going to be very crucial. Your best recruiting vehicles. I said this earlier today in a presentation, I'm going to say it again. Candidates do what's easy, not what's accurate. And it's easy for us to forget. It's our responsibility to get the right information. It's my recruiting team's responsibility to collect the right information. We cannot assume that because an applicant filled out an application on an ATS that they gave you half of the correct information. Odds are they did not, because they've applied to 30 positions in the last 2 weeks and they're doing what's easy, not accurate. It's a really important thing to remember. Your candidate decline reasons. This is one of my favorite reports to live and breathe by. Why are we moving away from our candidates and why are our candidates declining our offers? These are really powerful numbers. You have this, you can make big change. Compensation, your competitors' compensation, how are you stacking up? Where do you fall in line with that? Your interview results, and not just in the beginning, but through every phase of the process. What does that look like? Where is your fallout? And then what's the best technologies for you and your team to be using to yield the results you need? Another good one. So to go back and talk a bit more about cost of vacancy. This is a big one in so many different ways, but what does it cost to have your role open? Odds are your sales roles are costing you the most money to have open. But if you don't know what that looks like, you can take a deep dive and really look and see what the cost of each one of your vacancies are going to look like. In some instances, it's going to be your customer service reps that are going to cost you the most money to have those roles vacant, because now your consumer, your customer is not getting the service level. Maybe it's the sales, not pushing out. But if you don't know that, you don't know how to prioritize your openings so that you're getting the revenue that you need back in to move forward. Cost of vacancy is huge.
You can't tell your story, right? I don't mean to be interrupted, but I love
No, go ahead, Christine.
And if you're interested in learning more, because not a lot of work has been done around cost of vacancy, it is something that we do. And if you're interested and you want to send us something, we do have, send us a note, let us know, hit us up somehow, and we'll get you some more information out about cost of vacancy. But the thing about it, like Lindsay said, is it allows you to prioritize, but it also allows you to go back to your hiring manager and say, look, it's costing $600 a day if you don't make this interview. And watch them say, well, wait a minute, maybe I better do this. Or it also allows you to say, hey, sales, I know that you're struggling. I'm going to fill you in 42 days because these two positions, the cost of vacancy is $3,000 a day and your cost of vacancy is $1,000. This will also allow you to get budget. I mean, one of the clients that we worked for had a position that they wanted to expand from 200 to 2,200 around the country. Nobody wanted to do it because nobody in HR wanted to do it because it was direct sales reps in the field for telecommunications. So I don't want to do that either. I mean, how hard is that going to be? But they were a big client of ours, and when they came back, the head of sales, is to this day is still a good friend of ours, said to me, the cost for this position to be open is $100,000 a year, and that totally blew me away. And that number has increased every year. So when you say, when you put a value on something, it's, again, we go back to emotions, emotions lie, numbers don't. When you do the math for some of these, you're going to be blown away. The cost of vacancy is really powerful. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Lynn, I'm sorry.
No, it was a great story, Christine. So tracking each step of your recruiting cycle. So this is really challenging if your only technology is an ATS. If you've got another piece in there that you're utilizing along with that, you may be able to get a bit more of this information. However, it's really important to see where your fall off is happening, right? How many people did I have to source and then interview? How many of those people did I have to interview to put them in front of the hiring manager? How many of those people did my hiring manager interview? So what did it really take me to fill my funnel to get to my hire? Now, our applicant tracking systems do a lot of this work for us, but not necessarily the sourcing piece. How many people did we have to source in addition to our incoming and our pipelines, so that we're looking at the big picture? But if you're not tracking each step, you don't always know where you can make your improvements, what needs to be changed, what needs to be tweaked, and how much value you get out of those tweaks that you are making. A lot of the time, the heat's pushed back to the recruiter or the hiring manager. The recruiter's not giving me enough candidates. And then you talk to the hiring manager, and the hiring manager's sitting on 10 interviews, or the hiring manager left 2 hours open to interview and the recruiter didn't produce enough people to fill the time slot. Where are we falling short? What adjustments can we make? Where can we get the most value out of small changes in the recruitment process? So if you're not tracking this, you really should consider doing so and really taking a deep dive at that. Best recruiting vehicles. So this is one that gets me. I think that we all spend a lot of money on tools. There's so many great tools to use. There's so much great HR technology. It's really hard to keep up, to be honest with you. Today alone, I've gotten 5-6 different emails about new technologies that I genuinely want to take a look at. But are you utilizing them well? Are you getting a return on your investment? And are you spending that money well? So I do a lot of consulting with our clients to ensure that they are spending their advertising dollars well. Christine gave a great example of this earlier. We had a client, they were spending over $400,000 a year on a pay-per-click job board. I'm sure you all know which one I'm talking about. And at the end of the day, this job board was giving them their metrics. You've made this many hires with us. You're this far off with salary. That's pretty skewed information. So if you're not collecting this yourself, you're not having these conversations with your candidates, because again, they do what's easy, not accurate. How are we really collecting the true data? So we've tested this theory and we've talked to our candidates to see where they genuinely found the positions and track that separately than what they choose when they apply for a position. 90% of the time, there's a big difference there. They really don't see the position posted on LinkedIn or Career Builder or Indeed or a job board. Maybe someone sent it to them and they genuinely are a referral, or it popped up because if you log on to LinkedIn every day, it pushes you 10 jobs that may be a good fit for you. So really understanding how well your ads are working and what's really driving your candidates is really, really, really important. And I think that's something that as recruiters, we need to do more to really collect the data, because we can't rely on our candidates for that. It's not their job. Vendor spends. Hopefully everybody at some point is showing a cost savings here. So it's really important that we know how much money it's costing us in our vendor spend, and then what our return is, and can we show a cost savings in the new year? Are we getting what was being promised to us? Is this a partnership? Is this a relationship? And vendor spend is all over the place, and it could be whether you're partnering with an agency, you're partnering with an RPO, or you're using one of these extremely expensive job boards. Whatever the case may be, but make sure you're collecting your own information, your own data, because the reporting you're going to get from any of these sources is not the same reporting you're going to collect yourself. I can guarantee you that. Candidate decline reasons. So this is a really great one. Why are you choosing not to move forward with your candidates, and why are your candidates choosing not to move forward with you? Listen, if you're declining every candidate you're talking to, your teams are declining them, you've got the wrong team. It's time to take a look and say, okay, why are they not producing the right people? And then on the other hand, if you talk to 25 candidates, which means you've probably reached out to 100, 150, and out of those, at least half of them have declined the position for a specific reason, right? Salary is the biggest one. So we'll use that as an example. They declined for salary. Maybe it's time, if you're collecting this data, I can go to the business. I can go to my VP and say, look, I've talked to this many people, more than half of them have declined. We are $5,000 under market value for this position. We need to make a change. Well, now you have the power, right? You collected the data, you have the reporting, you can give it on over to them, and you can make change. But if you're not tracking this, you have nothing to back you up. You have to rely on the fact that these people trust you and are going to spend more money because you asked them to. The proof is in the numbers. So if you're really tracking your decline reasons, you can make big change and add some really big value. Competing companies, how are you stacking up? We dove into this a little bit deeper before. However, what is your comp on target? Are you in line? Is your EVP putting you out in front of the others? Are you watching your reviews? And are you tracking these things? Like Jess said, it's horrible to wake up to a Glassdoor review, but I track it when we do, because you can find some trends there. You can really kind of focus in on them. As long as you are managing your messaging, there's nothing wrong with tracking it either. And then the employment of your technologies. Like I was saying before, there's so many really great technologies, but make sure that they are going to capture your data and that they may talk with some of your other systems, because you do want to make sure that there's one centrally located place where you can pull your data and use it, because it is your arsenal.
Just in the essence of time, because we really only have 2 minutes left. So much to talk about. Jess, you want to do communication?
Yeah. So I think communication is one of the most important buckets in the recruiting continuum. And, being able to have relationships with your hiring managers so you can get timely feedback and understand what the business needs so you can support the stakeholders and meet their expectations. Making sure you really have a good understanding and that hiring manager understands how important their role is in recruitment, and being able to build a trust between recruitment and the hiring manager. Making sure your C-suite is in support of recruiting as well. So having buy-in across the organization. Having a cost of recruiting supplied to finance, so they're educated in that area as well. And being able to have a good share of the expectations of the market and recruiting time. So, no one's shocked when a position doesn't get filled in 15 days. They already know what the expectations are and how the market's looking. Mm-hmm. Some of the best practices we found to do this is, of course, really focusing on defining who your recruitment stakeholders are. So that's anyone from marketing, IT, your upper level executives, training and finance, and working to build a relationship with them. So understanding, how their business works, what their position is like, and what do they value? What are they looking for you to do? And then getting on the same page with them and building a strategy together. And that really takes a lot of interfacing, setting up weekly meetings with your hiring managers, showing them that you're engaged, sharing reporting with them so they can actually see the recruitment activity that's going on. And if you're facing those roadblocks, sharing those transparently with them. Quarterly reviews work really well with this for hiring managers, giving them an overall view of recruitment and being able to forecast and anticipate future hires as well. And then again, working with finance to share and determine all costs included in recruitment. I think sometimes just, hiring managers and finance and those other departments really don't know all the hard work that's going on behind the scenes. So being able to be open and transparent with them and to communicate this valuable data is really going to give you an advantage and pull everyone together for recruitment.
Well done. Guys did a great job.
Thank you.
We're getting all these comments from people saying, thank you, my team was having a rough day, boy, we loved. Yeah, we have to emancipate ourselves. I love this slide. We have to let go of the fact that we're drinking from, let's make a commitment not to say that, right? Not to say it, because you won't walk into a finance department and like, oh, go away, I'm drinking from the fire. No, I think we know we're drinking from the fires. The point is that if we stay in the quadrants, if we are able to put more leadership, you know what, we've got to. It's not like the whole world is depending on talent. It is. It's not like it is. It is. Our jobs are so important to how happy we are and how well we do and our own success and our kids' success. And we need to be the ones that are talking to the media and talking about the realistic challenges that are out there. We need to be the ones that are getting together at these coalitions to saying, how do we close the gap? Is training enough? Do we need to do we need to always look at a global market for recruiting? What are some of the things that we can do to pinpoint these skill sets that are, especially with AI coming in, and we're going to have all these truckers displaced. We've got so much going on. Let's play a bigger role. Let's start, working on it as compared to it working on us. Everybody's depending on us. Let's start making talent acquisition urgent and important. And let's just get out of the water line, right? I'd like to thank Lynn, great job. Jess, great job. You guys inspire me every time I listen to you. I can't wait till we're back in office sometime. I am loving this community. I cannot tell you how nice it's been to build this community in the middle of this epidemic and get to know so many of you. Email us, in-mail us. The LinkedIn, again, you'll get the LinkedIn connections. Let's start talking in the groups. There was a glitch in one of the groups. So we're starting to put some things out there now. Let's keep talking. We're looking at a couple of different things. Probably diversity will be coming up again. If you're interested in cost of vacancy, give me a shout out and we'll look at doing a presentation that we have for that. Let us know some other titles you're interested in. We'll keep doing these as long as you guys keep joining and you're interested. Thank you for following People Science, and thanks for being with us. Stay safe.